Gabrielle Massey is currently leading Human Trafficking Institute in Uganda. She is an esteemed prosecutor with an exceptional track record in fighting against gender-based violence and sexual abuse crimes. With her unwavering dedication and passion, she has become a driving force in the battle against human trafficking, making a significant impact on the lives of survivors. Having previously worked as a prosecutor in the Major Crimes Division of Texas Attorney General's Office, she specialized in cases involving sexually violent crimes against children and women. Her commitment to justice led her to become the first chief prosecutor of the Special Victims Unit in McLennan County, Texas. During her tenure, she handled all human trafficking crimes in the country, showcasing her expertise and dedication to tackling this heinous crime. Gabrielle's journey continued with her joining the Human Trafficking Institute as a special counsel to the Director of Public Prosecutions in Uganda. In this pivotal role, she collaborates with specialized anti-human trafficking, investigate, and prosecution teams, equipping them with necessary skills to effectively stop traffickers. Through real-time support and technical training, Gabrielle empowers Ugandan investigators and prosecutors to build robust cases against traffickers, enhancing their capacity to combat trafficking within the region. Her extensive experience and training investigators and prosecutors in Texas and Mongolia, as well as her ability to navigate different legal systems, made her an invaluable asset both for Uganda and we believe it will continue to India as well. So, Gabrielle's empathy and compassion for trafficking survivors drives her determination to make a lasting impact on their lives. She handled a lot of extensive trainings, both in Texas and other parts of US and then Uganda now. Um, she empowers and she aims to make this um, human trafficking zero tolerance zone in Uganda. With that, let's all welcome Gabrielle Massey to share her insights on trends and patterns.
All right. As was said, my name is Gabby Massey, and I'm the Senior Special Counsel with the Human Trafficking Institute here in Uganda. And what we do is we actually have been in Uganda since 2017, and we partner with we have MOUs with the Office of Director of Public Prosecution, the Uganda Police Force, as well as Uganda Judiciary. And what we do in our role is we actually have embedded experts that work with our government partners on building human trafficking cases, both trafficking cases that happen within Uganda's borders as well as transnational cases. So today I'm going to talk about, hopefully, there we go, some trends in transnational recruitment. And let me see if I can make this go away. There we go. And recruitment of victims. And so one of the things, and I know that later on there's going to be an entire session talking about victim vulnerability, but one of the things that is most important in understanding transnational human trafficking, as well as human trafficking that happens within their own country, is that all of these victims are vulnerable for some reason. There is something that allows the trafficker to take advantage of these victims and exploit them, whether that's for labor exploitation or sexual exploitation or other types of exploitation, financial, witchcraft, organ issues, or anything like that. I'm just having a problem. There we go. So one of the ways that we are seeing the trends as far as transnational. Now, I do want to say that globally, about 75% of human trafficking happens within one country's own borders, and about 25% is transnational, and that's a global statistic. But what we're seeing specifically in the transnational cases is oftentimes the recruitment will either be by a company or by a friend or a friend of a friend, an individual that somehow befriends these vulnerable humans that are vulnerable to being exploited. And when we're talking about recruitment companies, a lot of times they operate under the guise that it is simply externalization of labor. an externalization of labor or going to another country for work is not illegal. And it is something that, every country has people that go and work in other countries. Like myself, I'm from the United States and I'm working in Uganda. Clearly, that is not illegal activity, but these recruitment companies, if we're talking about on the large scale, you will have recruitment companies that pretend or appear to just.
Sorry about it. Gabby, we can't hear you.
There we go. I evidently got kicked out. So sorry, I will go back to sharing my PowerPoint. All right. So oftentimes these victims are lied to about their duties and circumstances surrounding their employment, which means that they may be told that they're going to, let's say it's a Ugandan woman going to India. She may be told that she's going there to work in a supermarket or to work as a housemaid or some other legal way of employment. But then when she gets to India, or whatever other country she's going to, we see that she's been lied to, and all of a sudden that job in the supermarket is no longer available. And instead, she is being forced to work in sexual exploitation to pay off her debt. And here, a lot of times like I said, people that are actually recruited for labor, whether that's being recruited by a company or by an individual. Many times there's individuals on like WhatsApp or other groups, like job seeking groups, where they will befriend someone, tell them about these great job opportunities. And then when they get there to the destination country, they end up being sexually exploited because now they're in what we call debt bondage, which is where a person their fees for being moved are paid by either the company or an individual. And then once they get to their destination, they're told you owe this amount of money for your transport here. And so you have to work that off. And this job in the supermarket is no longer available. So instead, you're going to be forced to, have sex with men for money. And then I will take all that money until your debt is paid off. And oftentimes, if victims don't want to do this, they are either threatened themselves with physical harm or threatened with physical harm to their families to get their compliance to do these type of exploitative actions. Additionally, especially when we're talking about Uganda and India, there is a high issue with it is a shame culture and there's a fear of reporting. People may be scared of police, or they have been told that you are partaking in something that's illegal. And so if you go to the police, they will arrest you for this. And additionally, most people that find themselves being victims of trafficking, no matter where they are in the world, don't want their friends, their family, their boyfriends, their partners to know what has happened to them. And so the traffickers will use shame and this fear of police to keep people in this exploitive actions and to keep them from telling anyone about what's happening to them. And like I said, there's also high levels of debt bondage where the person that is being trafficked may not understand that they will be liable for all of the cost of their transportation from, let's say, Uganda to India or India to Uganda or anywhere else in the world. And so when they arrive, they are then shackled with this very high amount of debt that they have to work to pay off. And most of the time, it's almost impossible for these victims to actually pay off this debt that they find themselves in. Additionally, most of the time, one of the ways that we are seeing that these large scale recruitment companies are getting away with this is they appear to be legitimate. They have, I just went on a trip and flying out of the Entebbe airport, which is the only international airport in Uganda, for those of you not familiar. And every time I fly there are many, many Ugandan women all wearing the same t-shirts of recruitment companies. Some of those may be legitimate jobs in other countries, but some of those women are going to end up in those other countries and be exploited. And so these large scale recruitment companies have the appearance of being legitimate. They have paperwork, they have business cards, they have everything that would lead someone that maybe doesn't know the full possible bad side of this to think that this is a legitimate opportunity for them and that they are going to be, having gainful employment at a legitimate employer when they get to their destination. Another trend that we see is that passports and travel documents are often taken upon arrival in destination countries. A few years ago, there was actually a survey of 1,500 Ugandan women that went to different countries under the premise of externalization of labor. And out of those 1,500 women, over 90% of them had their passports and travel documents taken upon arrival in their destination countries. And this is just another way that the trafficker can keep control over these victims, because the victims then do not have the ability, even if they were able to come up with the funds, the money to transport themselves back to their home country. They now don't have their documentation. And so they are literally stranded in these destination countries with only their traffickers to rely upon or to help them out in any way. Also, some of these bigger recruitment companies we're seeing are owned by very powerful people or have very powerful connections. And so even if someone does come forward about them, oftentimes the investigation process and prosecution can be very hard to accomplish because they may have multiple levels of board of trustees and people in charge. And also if they have these powerful connections, sometimes those investigations are shut down. And one of the issues with the victims, which kind of goes along with the passport and travel documents taken, is most of the time these victims that are taken from their home country are very unfamiliar with their destination country, and they often may not even know what city or exact location that they are at, or how to get out of that city, or have the contacts to even talk to anyone about how to get back to their home country. And so these are just some of the trends that we're seeing in the transnational recruitment of victims, at least here in Uganda, and it's very similar in India, as well as when there's been a number of studies done of women that have come from Uganda and ended up in India, and we're seeing all of these things from the passports, the lie and deception about their duty, as well as physical violence and the shame involved in just becoming a victim of this type of crime. Now I want to share a little bit of data with you. The Human Trafficking Institute, we do a lot on data. And so this comes from the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, their data. So these are the cases, the main statistics over the past 4 years, as far as Uganda cases that are actually prosecuted. And at the end of this, we're going to talk about some of the issues with prosecuting transnational crimes in any country, but especially these countries that we're in. The Uganda, as I said earlier, 75% of cases worldwide is understood are domestic and 25% are transnational. In Uganda, what is actually shown from the data is that only 10.6% of the total cases of human trafficking that are being prosecuted are transnational cases. Now, does that mean that is all of the transnational cases that are happening? Absolutely not. We know that these crimes are severely underreported, and they are also very hard to investigate, and we'll go over that in a little bit. But this is the actual numbers for the transnational cases that have been prosecuted here in Uganda, is that about 118 of them are adult victims, and 36 of them are child victims, and then we've got unknown, and then both adults and children. And so this is out of all of the cases that have been prosecuted in Uganda over the past 4 years. These are the numbers of adult victims versus child victims. And what we see in the domestic trafficking is it's actually the reverse of that. Children are more highly trafficked than adults, but it does make sense when we're talking about transnational that the adults would be more likely to be trafficked than children. Right. And then these are the case numbers. This is just a view of the case numbers based on region. And this turquoise large bubble here on the edge of Lake Victoria, that is what's called Nakabwa region, and that includes Entebbe Airport. And so that is why it makes sense that a lot of the transnational cases that we see here in Uganda are generated or starting out of the Entebbe Airport, because that is the only international airport in the country. All right. So if anyone wants more data specifically regarding all types of trafficking in Uganda, the Office of Director of Public Prosecutions, in conjunction with HTI, the Human Trafficking Institute, has done this website, which is called TipMap. And this is where I got all of the dashboards and that I just put up. And this is the website, tipmap.ug. There's a lot of information there that I just don't have time to go over it all today. I could speak on that for hours. But if you want to look into any more of the data specifically regarding Uganda, this is a good resource. And finally, I want to talk about just the challenges in transnational cases, because obviously we see from the data, prosecution of transnational cases is a smaller portion, at least here in Uganda. And one of the reasons is it's very hard to investigate cases across borders. If you have a Ugandan victim that is in India, in order for the police to properly investigate those cases, they would likely need to travel to India and do their investigation there. So they have to have permission of the government agents to come in and do their investigation. They also have to have the fundings or the finances to be able to do that, which when you're dealing with countries which are big source countries like Uganda is, and a lot of this is because of poverty or a lack of food insecurities and other issues, the country as a whole just doesn't have a lot of extra money to send all of their police to other countries to investigate. Additionally, victims may disappear or be unwilling to testify. And this is something as was noted, I've been working with victims of violent sexual crimes, human trafficking, child exploitation for about 13 years. I was a defense attorney for 5 years before that. So I've been working in criminal law since 2005. And what I have seen time and time again is in many types of sexually violent cases, victims don't want to testify. They don't want to go tell everyone in their village or in their town about what happened to them in these incredibly embarrassing situations. So they may be unwilling to testify. Sometimes the victims may disappear. When you have a transnational case, if you're trying to prosecute, let's say they're trying to prosecute in India, a victim that was brought from Uganda and was exploited in India, if that victim gets sent back to Uganda or goes back to Uganda, it may be very hard to find them again. So they may disappear. And oftentimes in these types of cases, the only witnesses we have are the perpetrators, the people abusing these women and children and victims, and then the victim themselves. So if we don't have the victim to testify, it's often very hard to prosecute. And additionally, logically, a lot of the evidence may be in India or Uganda, and it might be very hard to share that evidence or to get that evidence into a Uganda court if it was collected in India or vice versa from Uganda to India. So those can be very, very hard to prove your evidence in court. And then again, witnesses, if there are witnesses in addition to the victim, they may be reluctant to travel or unable to travel to the country in which the prosecution is happening. And again, there's just a huge underreporting of exploitation to police or authorities. People don't report because they're scared, because they've been threatened, because they're shamed. And so the fact that we know that these cases are highly underreported is a huge problem, and it's something that we have to work to build these cases and empower these victims to where they feel comfortable reporting this to police or authorities. That reaches the end of my PowerPoint. Here's my contact information for anyone that wants to reach out to me or has questions. I'm happy to talk in more depth about trafficking here in Uganda and internationally with anyone that would like to. So I appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Gabrielle, for that insights on the transnational concerns and issues that we have. We want to open a quick 5 minutes for any questions from the participants. We will have breakout discussion, but any specific questions that you want to route to Gabrielle on trends and patterns, you can either leave it in the chat box or you could just unmute and share.
Is there any special state or any province from where Uganda more girls are trafficked to India?
We don't have the data on that. I would say there's not necessarily one specific. We do know that there are areas where there is more food insecurity and more poverty, such as, in some of the West Nile region, which is the border between Uganda and the DRC, as well as the Karamoja region, which is the northeastern border. And just in all areas of trafficking, we do see a number of victims that come from those areas. But in all of the research that I've found, the victims have come from various parts of Uganda that are trafficked to India. So there's not a particular, this is, where they're being targeted necessarily. It's more they're being targeted because of what makes them vulnerable, which is most of the time poverty, large families that they are responsible for financially or want to help out their families, that type of thing.
Thank you, Gabby. So we had Sharon. He is a Child Welfare Committee representative from Delhi. Thank you for that question. We can take one more question. Okay, I have a question. Because we are on the topic of trends and patterns, do you see the similar trends in US or other developed or developing nations? Or is there any difference specific to Uganda and India?
No, it is something that I've seen in multiple different countries. I have trained and worked in Mongolia, which is a big source country, and it was very similar there to what we see in Uganda. I have worked on specifically some labor trafficking, some international labor trafficking cases when I was a prosecutor in the US. And we were seeing the same thing regarding debt bondage and, being lied to about their duties, having to work incredibly long hours. The particular case that I'm thinking of that I worked on quite extensively had victims, some from Guatemala, which is Central America, and some were Chinese nationals. And so depending on where they were moved from, depended on how much debt that they had and how much they were having to work off. The Chinese nationals were having to work off about 2.5 times what the Guatemalans did. But none of these victims were ever going to get out of that bondage, because at the same time that they were working to work off this debt, the traffickers were putting more debt on them because of living expenses, food, those types of things. And so that's what keeps people in this debt bondage cycle. And so I've seen it the same all over. We've got HTI has an organization. We've got a branch in Belize, and I trained there, and we see the same things there as pretty much here and all over the world. So unfortunately, it is something we see quite often, and it manifests very similarly.
And I think this is one of the most common myth that most of the people have, that it is different, developing nations don't have. Thank you so much for sharing on that. I see a hand raised. Please forgive me if I get any of your names wrong. I'm apologizing well in advance. So, Macinda Crispus, yeah, you want to ask your question?
My question is on the challenges of national cases. There is a point saying it is hard to investigate on across borders. So what are the new techniques we can put in place so that we can investigate well on those cross borders?
Okay. If I understand if I understand his question, I'm going to rephrase it. is like, because we see a lot of cross-border cases, what are the techniques that we could follow to mitigate those cross-border
Like, so if I understand correctly, I mean, the way, to me, the best way to combat trafficking is through education, because a lot of the victims may not have the education of the risks involved with some of these actions, or the knowledge to really vet the group that they're joining or who they're going with when they're going into another country. And so with transnational, I mean, with most types of trafficking, I think that education is key, but especially in transnational, because these victims are vulnerable because of a lack of education, because of poverty, because of food insecurities, or because, you know, maybe they grew up without a family, they don't have, you know, stable home life, they grew up in domestic violence situations, or they have previous sexual abuse in their history. And so, you know, if they have the education to understand the risks, hopefully less people will be victimized. And so I really believe that education is one of the best ways to combat trafficking in any way. And it looks like, so is Uganda a destination country? It looks like there's a couple of different comments. And yes, Uganda is a source, transit, and destination country. There are cases of Indian nationals that have been trafficked to Uganda as well. Unfortunately, in my research, I haven't found that any of them have been successfully prosecuted. Most of them because the victims disappeared or were unwilling to come forward. But yes, Lydia, we are a destination country as well as a source country. Now, obviously,
Yeah.
are we back now? Okay. So long and short, Lydia, is yes, we are a destination country as well, but we see a lot of cases where Uganda is a source country to India as well as other countries right now. And then another question in the chat was, can you provide insights into the demographics of trafficking victims in Uganda? Regarding in general, the national cases, most trafficking, what we see the most of is that girl children are the victims. When you're talking about international crimes, international trafficking, the highest demographic is generally adult females. And regarding exact age, most of the time it's, you know, young adults under 30, but that's not always the case. And then socioeconomic background, most of the time, one of the things that makes them vulnerable is poverty or insecurity.
Yes, thank you. I see a hand raised from the host of Salvation Army. We have a team of them joining together. Thank you. Would you like to ask your question?
Yeah.
Yes. Oh.
Hello, Captain
Hello.
Daniel Kaziro from Uganda. I have one question to ask. You have talked much about the airports as the main exits from the country. What about some of the exits like the harbors? Because we have seen many countries putting much emphasis on the airports, but on the harbors, there's not much emphasis because most of the people now are clever. They have to put much energy to make sure that their business continues. And you can see that at the airports, many people are there to make sure that they teach and come in to support or to check on those people who are going out. What about on water system, like the harbors, whereby people use also water transport to go? Because we've seen so many, like if you look at some news journals like the Al Jazeera, the CNN, you see many people being traveled from one country from one country to another, and the end yet they are using water. At the end, they report them as migrants. But at the end of it, if you can follow it critically, they are traffickers. How much have you done, especially on water system, on water transport system? Thank you.
So I haven't seen, particularly in Uganda, this does not mean it's not happening. I haven't seen a number of cases using water systems to transport people from Uganda elsewhere. That doesn't mean that it's not happening at all. I absolutely agree that it is likely happening. We see, like I said, a number of the transnational go through the airport, but also through some of the borders. Busia has a pretty open border, which for those not from Uganda, that is one of the eastern borders with Kenya. And, we've seen a number of trafficking just going across the borders. I was specifically focused on the India-Uganda connection. And so most of that is going to happen through the airport just because of the distance. But there is around the world, many people are using waterways to transport victims, and like you said, calling them migrants upon arrival, and so that happens. It is a very much a trend globally, and it is something that we all need to be aware of.
Thank you, Gabi. I also have just one question. You shared the challenges. Thank you for that presentation. I was wondering, is there a way forward for those challenges? Are there any recommendations? For example, for the very first challenge that talks about how to investigate cross-border cases, I was wondering, are there kind of bilateral agreements, in this case, between India and Uganda that are helping, especially when it comes to externalization of labor? Are there some kind of agreements that we have maybe with India that can help to guide us, especially CSOs or NGOs, or even all of us who are in this space, to be able to help especially in prosecuting cases? Thank you.
Yes. So I want to make it very clear, externalization of labor is not illegal or an issue. Externalization of labor is a right of people. It is only when the person is then exploited instead of getting the job that they contracted for, or that they had agreed to or were expecting. Regarding, communication amongst the governments is one of the biggest points. And I honestly, I don't know there are certain countries that if a Ugandan woman is, let's say, trafficked to Kenya, we have very good working relationships with Kenya. It is very easy for those two governments to work with each other. A Ugandan woman transported to maybe UAE or other Gulf states we're not going to get the cooperation from like the Saudi Arabian government or other things. And so specifically between Uganda and India, I'm not sure exactly where the government cooperation is landing, but that is something that is going to be the foundation of being able to work and gather the evidence between the two countries. But what I've seen that, there hasn't been a large amount of government cooperation. That doesn't mean that there aren't some agreements in place. I just haven't seen it in action yet.
Yeah. Yes, this is great. Thank you, Gabrielle, for your time and for your insights. And this has been such an engaging insights for all of us. Just to back up with the question that Julian had, yes, we do not have. However, tomorrow we have Ambassador Simon Mulango and we have Dr. PM Nair, who are representatives from the government, and we could put this request to them and take the onus of them, in initiating this conversations for bilateral agreement between Uganda and India, and also one of your questions on prevention strategies that Gabrielle was also mentioning. Yes, definitely an ounce of prevention is far more valuable than a pound of cure. And tomorrow we will have Dr. PM Nair address more on that. So stay tuned for more insights on it. Moving ahead, this is very exciting for me to invite our next speaker, primarily because as an organization and as an sorry, was somebody saying something? Okay,
Yes, I wanted to ask.
Yeah, sure.
I'm Colonel Teu from Uganda. I just want to find out from Gabi. We have talked much about Ugandans being trafficked to India, taken by our own Ugandans across to India. But we have not talked much of Indians coming to Uganda. We are seeing some of the Indians here in Uganda who have the way how they are. You can see that this person has also been trafficked from India. So can she come up and say something about it?
Yes, like I said, it definitely is happening. I have not personally seen the prosecution of those cases, but it is something that has happened where, as I said, Uganda is a source country, but it's also a destination country for many people of Asian descent from India, from different areas. And so that is absolutely something happening here where we see, nationals from other countries, from India, from, China and different parts of Asia that are either being labor exploited or sexually exploited here in Uganda as well. I didn't want to try to say that wasn't happening. It's just what we are seeing more cases of that are actually being reported to police are Ugandan women being transported, but that I'm not saying that it's not happening the other way. It is absolutely happening the other way. We've worked on some of those cases. They just have not been taken all the way to prosecution because of issues.
Yeah. Thank you, Gabby. So true. I mean, definitely, even when we were trying to find out the statistics, it's very important for us to understand most of these illegal crimes do not have statistics and they're not rightly accounted for. And here comes the collaboration that all of us can do, a task to number all these victims, be it Indians, be it Ugandans. I think we should start with that, where we number the number of different aspects that are they being trafficked for and the number of victims that are being there. Thank you, Gabby, for once again.